Well, good morning, everybody. Good to see you on this Earth Day, even if it is just virtually. I wanted to make this video because a few people have expressed concerns about how to pull up the text of the time machine, because the chapters that we are reading are different from the chapters that you might find in another copy for some reason. I'm not really sure why. So here's what you need to do. You just go to your Google page. I've just chosen to use Third Hour as a model. Click on Classwork. Go down to just where it says attendance, and then you scroll down to chapter 9, the time machine. That's the one we're reading today. And then if you go up to these three dots over here where it says more actions, click on that, click open in new window, and now you have more options up here. So all you need to do is click the download button, and it'll download it, as you can see, to your computer. I'm going to open this up. Whoop. Let's see. I'm going to open this up. Open. And there we go. Say now we're good. And now this button right here, it says rotate clockwise. And now I can rotate the text and actually see it as it was intended. So what I'd like to do for the remaining few minutes, a few people have asked me to do this, that they find this text harder to read, find it a little confusing at times. So I'll actually go through it and read this chapter with you right now, pausing here and there to just talk about what I'm thinking, what you might want to be thinking about, and that way you'll be caught up if you have the time. Please forgive me for little pauses here and there. It's early in the morning. I'm still drinking my coffee and stuff like that, but yeah, here we go. Chapter 9 of the Time Machine, Morlocks. It may seem odd to you, but it was 2 days before I could follow up the newfound clue in what was manifestly the proper way. I felt a peculiar shrinking from those pallid bodies. They were just the half-bleached color of the worms and things one sees preserved in spirit in a zoological museum, and they were filthily cold to the touch. Probably my shrinking was largely due to the sympathetic influence of the Eloi, whose disgust of the Morlocks I now began to appreciate. The night I did not sleep well. Probably my health was a little disordered. I was oppressed and perplexity with doubt. Once or twice I had a feeling of intense fear for which I could perceive no definite reason. I remember creeping noiselessly into the great hall where the little people were sleeping in the moonlight. That night Weena was among them, and feeling reassured by their presence. It occurred to me even then that in the course of a few days the moon must pass through its last quarter and the nights grow dark, when the appearances of these unpleasant creatures from below, these whitened lemurs, this new vermin that had replaced the old, might be more abundant. And on both these days I had the restless feeling of one who shirks in an inevitable duty. I felt assured that the time machine was only to be recovered by boldly penetrating these mysteries of underground. Yet I could not face the mystery. If only I had a companion, it would have been different. But I was so horribly alone, and even to clamber down into the darkness of the well appalled me. I don't know if you will understand my feeling, but I never felt quite safe at my back. So at this point, I'm just kind of thinking, why is he going into all this detail? And I think it's about more building just how terrifying these Morlock creatures are, as well as it's not just the creatures, but it's a sense that the time traveler is very, very alone, to use his words, in this new place. Yes, he has this companion friend, Weena, but at the same time, she can't really be with him on an intellectual level. She's more like a child, and so he's just kind of longing for a friend, someone who will help him face his fear of the dark. So let's continue. It was this restlessness, this insecurity perhaps, that drove me further and further afield in my exploring expeditions. Going into the southwestward, towards the rising country that is now called Combe Wood, I observed far off in the direction of 19th century Banstead, a vast green structure, different in character from any I had hitherto seen. It was larger than the largest of the palaces or ruins I knew, and the facade had an oriental look. the face of it having the luster as well as the pale green tint, a kind of bluish green, of a certain type of Chinese porcelain. This difference in aspect suggested a difference in use, and I was minded to push on and explore. But the day was growing late, and I had come upon the site of the place after a long and tiring circuit. So I resolved to hold over the adventure for the following day, and I returned to the welcome and the caresses of little Weena. But the next morning I perceived clearly enough that my curiosity regarding the palace of green porcelain was a piece of self-deception to enable me to shirk by another day an experience I dreaded. I resolved I would make the descent without further waste of time, and started out in the early morning towards a well near the ruins of granite and aluminum. So clearly the time traveler has been checking out his surroundings a little bit and has been working up the courage to go into them. So let's see what happens next. Little Weena ran with me. She danced beside me to the well, but when she saw me lean over the mouth and look downward, she seemed strangely disconcerted. "Goodbye, little Weena," I said, kissing her, and then, putting her down, I began to feel over the parapet for the climbing hooks. Rather hastily, I may as well confess, for I feared my courage might leak away. At first she watched me in amazement. Then she gave a most piteous cry, and running to me, began to pull at me with her little hands. I think her opposition nerved me rather to proceed. I shook her off, perhaps a little roughly, and in another moment I was in the throat of the well. I saw her agonized face over the parapet and smiled to reassure her. Then I had to look down at the unstable hooks to which I clung. So here we can see that, this is a very, very dangerous thing, that Weena is terribly concerned for the time traveler here. Doesn't want him to go, just kind of like a child might not want their parent to go to work or something like that. So let's keep going here. I had to clamber down a shaft of perhaps 200 yards. The descent was effected by means of metallic bars projecting from the sides of the well, and these being adapted to the needs of a creature much smaller and lighter than myself. I was speedily cramped and fatigued by the descent, and not simply fatigued. One of the bars bent suddenly under my weight and almost swung me off into the blackness beneath. For a moment I hung by one hand, and after that experience I did not dare to rest again. Though my arms and back were presently acutely painful, I went on clambering down the sheer descent with as quick a motion as possible. Glancing upwards, I saw the aperture, a small blue disc in which a star was visible, while little Weena's head showed a round black projection. The thudding sound of a machine grew louder and more oppressive. Everything, save that little disc above, was profoundly dark, and when I looked up again, Weena had disappeared. I was in agony of discomfort. I had some thought of trying to go up the shaft again and leave the underworld alone, but even while I turned this over in my mind, I continued to descend. At last, with intense relief, I saw dimly coming up, a foot to the right of me, a slender loophole in the wall. Swinging myself in, I found it was the aperture of a narrow, horizontal tunnel in which I could lie down and rest. It was not too soon. My arms ached, my back was cramped, and I was trembling with this prolonged terror of a fall. Besides this, the unbroken darkness had had a distressing effect upon my eyes. The air was full of the throb and hum of machinery pumping down the shaft. So you got to picture this right now. The time traveler is kind of climbing down into this well of darkness, and it's getting darker and darker, and he's getting more and more tired with each step, until finally there's this kind of little hole or tunnel in the wall here where he can actually go in and rest. And it's, say, it couldn't come soon enough. And at the same time, he's very, very worried because he can no longer see Weena above, doesn't really know what, happened to her. So let us continue. Say, I did not know how long I lay. I was roused by a soft hand touching my face. Starting up in the darkness, I snatched at my matches and hastily striking one, I saw 3 stooping white creatures similar to the one I had seen above the ground in the ruin, hastily retreating before the light. Living as they did in what appeared to me impenetrable darkness, their eyes were abnormally large and sensitive, just as are the pupils of the abysmal fishes, and they reflected the light in the same way. I have no doubt they could see me in the rayless obscurity, and they did not seem to have any fear of me apart from the light. But so soon as I struck a match in order to see them, they fled incontently, vanishing into the dark gutters and tunnels from which their eyes glared at me in strangest fashion. So you got to imagine how terrifying this is. He's in this complete darkness, hundreds of feet below the earth into this well, and he sees these white creatures that have grown accustomed to darkness. And it even says that they are not afraid of him. Okay, it says that they are not afraid of him. It's that they're more afraid of the light. Right there. Say they didn't have any fear of me except for the light. So we can kind of sense that there's probably going to be some kind of skirmish or, misadventure happening. I tried to call to them, but the language they had was apparently different from that of the overworld people, so that I was needs left to my own unaided efforts, and the thought of flight before exploration was even then in my mind. But I said to myself, "You're in it for now." And feeling my way along the tunnel, I found the noise of machinery grow louder. Presently, the walls fell away from me, and I came to a large open space, and striking another match, saw that I had entered a vast arched cavern, which stretched into utter darkness beyond the range of my light. The view I had of it was as much as one could see in the burning of a match. So again, this is absolute pitch black. He's kind of come to this opening, but he can't see what's there. It's got to be absolutely terrifying. All he can see is kind of as much as this match in his hand allows him to see. He can't see more than, maybe a foot or 2 in front of his face. Just think about how terrifying that would be. The author is really building suspense here. Necessarily, my memory is vague. Great shapes like big machines rose out of those dimness and cast grotesque black shadows in which dim spectral Morlocks sheltered from the glare. The place, by the by, was very stuffy and oppressive, and the faint hiatus of freshly shed blood was in the air. Some way down the central vista was a light table of white metal, laid with what seemed a meal. The Morlocks, at any rate, were carnivorous. Even at the time, I remember wondering what large animal could have survived to furnish the red joint I saw. It was all very indistinct, the heavy smell, the big, unmeaning shapes, the obscene figures lurking in the shadows, and only waiting for the darkness to come at me again. Then the match burned down and stung my fingers, and fell, a wriggling red spot in the blackness. So, if the terror is just mounting and mounting and mounting, because now it's not just that it's dark and he's surrounded kind of by these creatures that he can barely see, but also now he can smell blood in the air. He talks about, the Morlocks being carnivorous. There's this line right here, the heavy smell, the unmeaning shapes, the obscene figures lurking in the shadows. You can just tell how terrifying this is. And if that's not bad enough, his match has now gone out and he's been plunged into darkness. Now, this recording only lasts 15 minutes, so I'm actually going to pause here. And if you want to finish the chapter with me, which is only another 2 pages, just go to the next recording. See you in a minute.